Did you know that Wayland just won't work on some workflows? And hear me out, because I'm really not talking about like nostalgia or refusing to change or something like this, right? We all know that sometimes when people have too many options, the brain just kind of shuts down for some people. I'm not talking about that. Anyway, this is more about like architecture, architecture versus ideology, if you will. See, I saw this setup over the weekend. Somebody joined my Discord server. You can join my Discord server too if you'd like. And Wayland didn't break his setup accidentally. It literally removed all of his assumptions of his entire workflow that it actually depends on. This is a 30-year-old stable workflow. And Wayland just comes in and says, well, hey, we're going to change everything up and we're going to kill Xorg and there's nothing you can do about it, kind of thing. So if you were thinking I was talking about network transparency through this whole thing, you would be absolutely correct, actually. Now, if you could just imagine one desktop, right? And multiple headless machines. What's a headless machine? Well, a headless machine is basically you're running the machine from either a virtual machine or another computer, but you're not running it with the graphical interface. You're just running it as like a background service. Anyway, this guy had dozens of permanent chew roots. Not containers, not virtual machines, chew roots. And he was able to pull up windows from those remote machines to appear locally. The audio worked with it because of network transparency. And the window manager of his main system just controlled everything. Like he used SSH for like universal remote execution. And uptime literally was measured in months at this in this particular scenario. And this used to be normal Unix behavior. This isn't a hack. I would just start off by saying that the world is bigger than the laptop you're hunched over, right? The modern Linux, it assumes a few things. One machine, one user, one screen, one location kind of thing. The reality from experienced users is we use multiple machines, remote systems, mixed hardware, and decades of accumulated work. And so just to be abundantly clear here, this isn't about old versus new. It's about what kind of work the system allows you to keep, right? And I think this is the crux of the issue. I could go on about the technical details or the technical merits of network transparency, for example. But I think one of the things that's going on is there's this false framing of X11 versus Wayland. The debate is usually framed X11 is legacy, Wayland is modern, and I think this misses the greater point. I have to just say that X11 wasn't just a display server. Let's start there, right? It was a network transparent UI protocol. UI and compute were intentionally separable. Wayland explicitly rejects this model. And if you write to the Wayland stack, your network literally gets chopped off. And this is problematic. I have to just say network transparency used to be a contract. And it wasn't a feature. And this is probably the biggest hurdle a lot of new users face today, is that they think that network transparency is like a feature of some sort. Display isn't a hack. It's literally like a promise. You could run apps in the server room. display them on a laptop in the living room. Same menus, same behavior, same muscle memory. Why does this matter? Who cares, right? The user decides where things run, not the desktop environment, not the compositor. Wayland assumes local execution, local display, tight coupling. And that is a major philosophical shift. It's not a technical one. Okay, so I think a lot of people might actually be a little confused here about what the implication is with network transparency, for example. Network transparency allows you to basically use a computer in a headless state and use applications and run them on your main system and just, basically transfer them over to your main system and have full features, including, video and audio and everything. However, in Wayland, you don't have that option. And they've had some workarounds, and I know that Brody has basically had a little bit of misinformation lately where he says, oh yeah, this is fixed. Not exactly. So let me tell you the difference between the two, and you decide, right? You decide if this is something that you want to use, okay? But basically say that you have a headless computer that you want to use on your main system, right? So I have this computer right here, and say I wanted to use it in a headless state. And, a lot of times your browser takes up a lot of real estate, right? A lot of memory. And with that memory, maybe, like 4 or 5 gigs, why not run it in a headless state and run it on your main computer? You'd have full volume, full everything, and then you wouldn't have your main computer being bogged down with 5 gigabytes worth of, of RAM memory, for example. This is a real life scenario that you could actually do with Xorg, or X11, if you will. With Wayland, it's sketchy at best if the video or the audio work when you put it on your main computer, but that's not the biggest issue. Say it worked perfectly. What Wayland does is it actually takes the full desktop and puts it on your main computer. So for example, if you had 4 apps that you use from this headless computer, you would have 4 desktops stacked on top of your computer. It's not the worst solution, but there are many better solutions than that. Especially when with Xorg, you could have 4 apps just being run on your main computer. Now, the setup that I saw over the weekend, he had been polishing the same desktop for over 30 years. Now, that might seem insane to modern users until you think about muscle memory, ergonomics, eye strain, cognitive load. I mean, come on. Stable systems let you keep buttons for more than 20 years. Reuse menu files everywhere. Avoid relearning workflows. And in this particular example, I'll give you a really good example. XFCE panel broke his menu, where window maker menus have literally survived for decades on this person's system. And when I see systems like this, these are the people that I look to. I have to say that there is a real cost of like the whole modern UX thing. Real integration is harder than replacement. And that's kind of what makes systems kind of brittle, fragile. If you're not thinking that you will have the same system for the next 20 or 30 years, maybe that's not important to you. And this is the problem that I have personally with Wayland is it literally isn't built for long-term use. I guarantee you, Wayland's going to be gone probably in 5 years. Another shiny object will come along and replace it. And some people will sit there and cry that, they're taking Wayland from them. When you try to plan everything from top down, and you basically declare your parameters and you don't leave any room for things to be used that in ways that was never intended, right? But here's the thing is we have this mentality in the current Linux ecosystem where you say dump it and start over. The disposable mindset was taught, but unfortunately it just isn't natural. This is something that's learned. Okay, the Microsoft Windows culture trained us to reinstall, rewrite, and replace the 3 R's. Remember those, right? Because the Unix culture, which is what Linux inherited, taught us to preserve, adapt, and reuse. Okay, now there are a few examples that I could give you based on the person that I saw his workflow, right? He pulled up, BBS traffic from 1982 that was still readable, or an OS/2 email and inbox via Thunderbird, and it still works. And the idea is like data longevity. We need to be able to preserve things. And this is like a novel concept to these people. Your modern setups already include virtual machines, containers, chroot, emulators, NUMA systems, remote compute over fiber if you want. Literally, this setup that I saw over the weekend contained all of those things, and X11 embraced this reality fairly early on. The sandbox you play on can be as big as the globe. Everything behaves the same everywhere. But Wayland, it pretends that the desktop is local and simple. I have to say, a lot of people think that people who designed X11 were these super geniuses who saw the future. It wasn't. Okay, it literally wasn't. X11 existed because SQL hadn't existed yet. Back in the 80s, databases weren't databases. They were files. They were flat files, index files. They're really painful, cumbersome, heavy. Well, if you had to run a program on your desktop, it had to pull the indexes over a network, scan the records remotely, or ship entire chunks of data just to answer a simple question. That doesn't scale very well, to be honest. So X11's idea was really rather simple. Don't move the data, move the UI. Run the program right next to the data in the server room. And send only mouse clicks, keystrokes, and drawing commands over the network. Think of it as like, 2 pipes, for example. One pipe, it moves big, heavy data. It's expensive. The other pipe moves interaction. It's tiny, it's cheap, it's constant. X11 only cared about the second pipe. So SQL shows up and everything changes. Suddenly, you can send a tiny query, give me this row, and get a tiny answer back. And at that point, X11 should have become obsolete. You would have at least thought so, right? Its original reason for existing was literally gone. However, it didn't die, and here's why. X11 never enforced why you were using it. It didn't say, this is only for servers, or this must be local, or remote use is special. No, it just moved Windows and input. That was its function. So when the world changed, X11 didn't break. It just was used differently. However, Wayland takes a much different approach. It assumes a local desktop, local compositor, clear boundaries, and tighter control. And I have to say, that's not stupidity. That's just a design choice. But it also means UI pipes stop at the machine. X11 never asked permission, and the systems that don't assume they know the future, I'm just going to be real, they tend to outlive the ones that do. I wouldn't be surprised if Xorg outlives Wayland. So at this point, ergonomics is a game. When the flash wears off, the animations age poorly. Usually what lasts is the readability, the low effort, and the predictability. The smaller the effort, the longer you can be in front of it. I guess I need to just talk about what progress is and is not. A few things progress isn't is when it replaces everything, when it breaks workflows, or declaring that the past is obsolete. Progress is letting the past labor and continue to pay dividends. The real conflict in Linux is not old versus new, it's whether your work is allowed to survive. And the systems that assume that they know the future age faster than systems that admit they don't.